So I spent Seret Yemei Tshuva in St. Louis with Eden, visiting our daughter Noah at college. It was Parents' Weekend, and it was really exciting. While we were there, we walked around campus discussing her classes and my Divrei Torah, because what else do you discuss on Parents' Weekend? And she told me about a story the author John Green shared in his book, The Anthropocene Reviewed, in which he describes a moment. He says, "When I was 22 and working as a student chaplain at a children's hospital, I would spend 24 hours on call once or twice a week. One of my last nights on call, toward the end of my 6-month chaplaincy, I was asleep in the pastoral care office when the trauma pager sent me down to the emergency department. A 3-year-old child was being wheeled in. He'd suffered severe burns. Next thing I knew, I was in the windowless family room in the emergency department, the room where they put you on the worst night of your life. It was quiet, except for the crying of the couple across from me. They sat on opposite sides of the couch, elbows on knees. During my training, they told me that half of marriages end within a couple of years of losing a child. Weekly, I asked the parents if they wanted to pray. The woman shook her head no. The doctor came in and said that the kid was in critical condition. The parents only had one question, and it was one the doctor couldn't answer. We'll do everything we can, she said, but your son may not survive. Both the parents collapsed, not against each other, but into themselves. This is the story he tells. I just want to share with you that this child lived and the family stayed together and was good and healthy when he was 18 years old. Apparently he had bad taste in music. Other than that, all was good. But I want to listen to that last word, that last line that he said. He said, both the parents collapsed, not against each other, but into themselves. How often do we do this? When faced with great pressure from external or internal sources, how often do we find ourselves falling inward, collapsing into ourselves instead of onto another who might just be able to help? We make excuses. It's just too much. I don't want to bother them. But really, what's happening is that we are creating walls of our own vulnerability. When feeling such deep pressure, we simply build a fortress around ourselves with our vulnerability. We hide from others. We don't dare to share our pain or our distress. So often we feel unable to do what this day of Yom Kippur demands of us. Because Yom Kippur is above all a time of facing and embracing our vulnerability. It's a day of removing the masks and the armor we use to protect us from pain and from the shame throughout the year. A time to simply engage in honest self-scrutiny, strengths and weaknesses together. It's a day of touching our vulnerability. It's a moment of lowering the walls built to protect us. That is ultimately the work of this day, and it is hard. It is so hard to be vulnerable with ourselves, much less with anyone else. So we block others out. We convince ourselves that we must stand alone. No one else will understand. No one will respect us if they really see our doubts, our pain, our limitations. So we create walls to protect us, even from ourselves, walls that ultimately block our ability to even understand, much less support our own selves. With the help of our walls, we become experts in avoidance, afraid to touch that which makes us vulnerable. We do this with ourselves, and we do it with others as well. We create walls of vulnerability that stand between us and our spouses, our family, and even our cherished friends. We are simply afraid of how others will see us when we are deeply vulnerable. How harshly will we be judged if we dare to show others that most human part of ourselves, the part that is so sad, so scared, so angry or fearful or ashamed or whatever we see as less than in ourselves. Precisely in the moment when we so desperately need support, in moments of life changes and transitions, illness or death, even joyous moments like births or marriage or moving or starting college, we are unable to lean on others. The more we need support, the less we're able to ask for it. This spirals in intensity until we find ourselves falling inward, crumbling into ourselves. In these moments, some turn to support from the internet. Somehow, this somewhat anonymous instrument in which we share moments of vulnerability with virtual strangers provides an easier avenue for asking for help than a phone call to a friend or a family member. And we do tend to receive that virtual support, those messages that we want. But if what we really want is not to feel alone, I hate to say it, but Facebook and Instagram are insufficient. To really do that, we have to genuinely show ourselves to people in our life, the good and the bad, all of us, in real time and 3D. That can be scary, but avoiding it leads to loneliness and a sense of isolation. This is true of individuals in personal crisis, it's true of communities, and it can even be true of nations. We've watched all of this play out in our world this year, as people, community, and nations have fallen in, have collapsed on themselves, unable to connect, effectively isolating themselves from those who might most be able to help. But what would it mean if we could actually learn a different way, to learn to fall onto each other, to lean on another in a real way, to allow others to really rely on us, to lean on us, to be able to show ourselves and one another that we are not alone. I know this is easier said than done. The biggest challenge to this is that it requires something we don't like to talk about so much these days, emunah, often translated as faith. But at its heart, the Hebrew word emunah is really about trust. Trust that we can be seen and heard for who we are, judged only by the present moment and not by any preconceived notions of who we have been or who we might be. Trust requires a belief that others will see us as God saw Ishmael in the wilderness, ba'asher hu sham, in the place where he is. No expectations, no assumptions, just how he is in the moment. If we're honest, for many of us, that kind of trust is hard to have in good times, when things are going pretty smoothly, and we are far from good times. The level of emunah, of trust in one another, feels like it's at a lifetime low. For those who recall America during the Vietnam War, or were we able to have been there and seen the Civil War in the United States, I suspect that that feeling was similar. But for many, this deeply polarized moment we're living through is as empty of emunah as we have ever experienced as a society. The polarization, the threats we feel are so real, it's hard to know whom to trust and about what. That's why it's so hard to fall onto another. It takes emunah, it takes trust to do so, and we live in a world of broken emunah. This lack of trust leaves us expecting to be met with hostility from neighbors and even friends. And it's causing a ridiculous level of loneliness and isolation that we as individuals and as a community are struggling to handle. This is true for America as a society, and it's particularly true for us as Jews. Think about this year. This year, 70% of religious-based hate crimes in the United States targeted Jews. You can feel the fear of this rising anti-Semitism when walking into this or any Jewish building. The number of guards in place, the lockdown mechanisms that felt so unnecessary a decade ago and are now a given. You can feel it on campuses where 78% of Jewish students report hiding their Jewish identity at least once. Anti-Semitism is real and can be felt in ways we have not had to encounter in recent memory. We know that in America alone, Jews have been murdered outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum in DC and in a hostage rally in Boulder, Colorado. They've been targeted in their homes, at work, and on the streets. It's no wonder that emunah is hard to find. And we know that this anti-Semitism is coming not only from the far right, who have long espoused anti-Jewish rhetoric, and from whom we have become accustomed to seeing anti-Jewish behavior, right? We recall chants of Jews will not replace us from advocates of the replacement theory in Charlottesville just a few years ago. But it's also from the far left, and most challenging for me, from many who we thought were our allies, people who stood side by side with us on issue after issue. Since October 7th, 2023, this camaraderie cannot be assumed. This, for me at least, has been a shock and a deep challenge, leading to a tremendous sense of isolation over the last couple of years. This year alone, people in this community have shared a few things with me. They've said, my colleagues won't talk with me because I will not condemn Israel's existence. I feel like walking away, but this is my career. My teacher is sharing videos claiming all Jews hate Iranians and are cruel to them. What do I do? My friends, I lost so many these last 2 years. I'm so lonely. My Instagram feed is so frustrating. I wish it would go back to puppies and babies. That's my favorite. I'm afraid to wear my Jewish star on the subway, but I'm ashamed if I tuck it in or take it off. I love this Israel shirt my grandma gave me, but it feels like wearing it will start a fight. So I'll leave it in the drawer. It's too scary. This is the tension and loneliness that's become part of our world as American Jews. And more than that, we're feeling a growing rift within the Jewish community itself. Ideas are being weaponized. Ears and hearts are closed to difference. Fear of retribution can squelch honest conversation. We're afraid of being canceled within our own communities or condemned by those outside. One of the saddest moments for me this year was when someone wrote graffiti on our hostage sign, the one that simply pleads for the release of hostages in Gaza. And the graffiti was saying how offensive they found this sign as a Jew. I know we can disagree about Israel's actions, history, and use of power and the like, but to deface a prayer for freedom for those who are being held captive, I'm not naive, but this particular action, which happened repeatedly, you'll see all the white tape over on that sign. I taped over each and every moment when the graffiti was placed because I didn't want to remove the sign. And I didn't want them to win. But I'm not naive. But this moment did make me question my hope, my dream for a united, connected Jewish people. But luckily, each time it only lasted a moment. The truth is, the vitriol is making it hard to feel safe anywhere, physically or emotionally. People are deeply and justifiably afraid of hostility or of being canceled. We find ourselves afraid to speak, much less share our real reactions, our vulnerabilities, even within families, even with our friends, even within the Jewish community, all because of fear of losing the relationships we have. As the prophet Jeremiah opined, I heard the whispers of the crowd, terror all around. Inform, let us inform against him. All my supposed friends are waiting for me to stumble. Perhaps he can be entrapped, and we can prevail against him and take our vengeance on him. Like Jeremiah, we feel like if we open our mouths, we will be attacked. People are mocking me. Is it worth speaking anymore, he asks. Even and perhaps especially within the Jewish community, we're afraid to speak for fear of being attacked in some way. And fear in these moments makes us feel like we have to be more absolutist in our thinking and our assertions. Jews in America are so divided. Places that might once have felt safe don't feel safe. We find it hard to even hear those with whom we disagree. Communities have stopped people who hold views different than the majority from participating in conversation or even being welcome in the community. With Zionists ostracized in some spaces, anti-Zionists in others, the tension is palpable. Our community is fracturing, and that is deeply dangerous. Yet for some, there's something appealing about these rifts. As Amanda Ridley explains, in a state of high conflict as we are in now, disagreement can become magnetic, identity forming. People in high conflict don't just want to be right. They come to need the conflict itself. It offers clarity, certainty, and even purpose, but it locks us into a pattern from which it is difficult to exist. What it does not do is allow for vulnerability. On the contrary, it encourages us to enhance, expand, and deepen our walls, to keep them as high and as strong as possible, therefore isolating ourselves even more from those with whom we disagree. The good news is that we are not the first to have struggled with this, nor to have lived through a moment such as this. Around 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people faced another deeply conflictual and even existential threat, the time of Churban HaBayit, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the exile of the Jewish people. You can imagine the fear. Their world was destroyed. Their assumptions about how to live, how to connect with the divine, how to survive as a people, all had been upended. And the fear and conflict among the people was unprecedented. So what did they do in this moment of peril, when it was clear that they could lose it all? The Talmud tells us the first thing they did was convene. They consciously called the community together. Come in from the edges of the field, we're told. In a time of great danger, do not scatter. Al tifros min hatzibur. Do not separate from the community. Do not push people out of the community, no matter their beliefs. In times of crisis, we must gather in. We are Knesset Yisrael. We must convene the people. As we know from the book of Esther, when destruction threatened the Jewish community of Persia, she said, Lech, knos kol haYehudim. Go, gather all of the Jews. This must be the call of the day, today. It's too lonely, too dangerous for us to separate from one another today. We have to find each other. We must be able to lean on one another, even if it means collapsing onto one another. That's the first step. But don't misunderstand me or the rabbis of the Talmud. This is not about circling the wagons. On the contrary, the rabbis of the Talmud were quick to remind us that in these moments of crisis, we must come together and be ready to hear varied ideas. It's still a Jewish experience. We cannot assume a single ideal, a single ideology will carry us all. Indeed, it will be considered too dangerous to have but a single idea present among Knesset Israel. On the contrary, we must hold multitudes within our community. There's value in that. We must give up on the absolute. That is the enemy of the possible. In times of fear, when it looks like all will be lost, fear will make us more absolutist. We become fearful of being diverse, even when that's exactly what's necessary. But what if, Dafka, at these moments, we could stop and look for moderation and diversity and nuance? What if we could make room to be vulnerable and say, mi odea, who knows? Just maybe I can understand better by listening to you who seem to be saying something I found terribly difficult to hear. That would be an act of true vulnerability. It would be an act of true spirituality, true emunah. For as Aviva Zornberg reminds us, the Talmud tells us, teach your tongue to say, I do not know. For not knowing is at the heart of religious honesty. I know this feels so hard to do nowadays, but what if we could? What if we could hear our truth, but have the humility to say, I do not know all there is to know. Let me really listen to you who looks at this very differently from me. Shema. Shema is the watchword of our faith. But how often do we truly listen? Instead, we're speaking past one another in so many different directions with so many different languages and different memories. Our challenge is to find the courage to speak our truth and to truly listen, to hear the truth of the other. Shema. There is not a single truth. If we want to be heard, we must listen to others. I know the pressure that's around out there to step away, to only listen to those who are thinking exactly or nearly exactly as we are. And I actually want to extend my gratitude to those who are with us in this room and on Zoom today, those who have not walked away, even when, as is likely the case, there was pressure to do so. I want to extend my gratitude to those who continue to engage with others in our community, even with those who are, quote, late to the party, even if we still disagree, even very deeply, even if we come to different conclusions. It doesn't seem so remarkable, but considering the polarization of our day, to do this is truly a statement of faith and confidence and hope for our future. And I don't take that for granted. As I said on Rosh Hashanah, I find it so easy to see myself as a nuanced, complicated, thoughtful individual who carries multitudes within. But I must teach myself to see the one with whom I disagree as anything. I have to teach myself to see them not as a less than thoughtful bore, a flat, uncaring person, but someone who themselves carries multitudes within. Learning to do this is very countercultural right now. We used to think of others with whom we disagreed as wrong. Now we tend to think there's something wrong with them. That is sinat chinam. That is causeless hatred. That, according to rabbinic tradition, is precisely why the temple was destroyed, why we went into exile. On the contrary, a deep respect, even for those whose opinions are painful to hear, is a very Jewish response to these troubled, divisive times. Consider the Talmud. The Mishnah, compiled in the year 200, is a compilation of disputes, machlakot, among the sages. And the Gemara, which developed over the next 400 years or so, is an elaboration on responses to the Mishnah, a never-ending debate. Essentially, it's a discussion about discussions about discussions. 97% of these debates have no conclusion. That is the culture of the Talmud. That is our core text, right? It's amazing. You should take the Talmud class with Aaron Halberstam once a week on Shabbat. You'll get a taste of it. Once a month. Yeah. Oh, would only that it be once a week. It's fun. All right. Sorry. In traditional Jewish circles, two experiences are critical to Judaism. One is studying Talmud. The second is following halacha. What's fascinating is that in the study of Talmud, we're required to study ideas that we are not allowed to live by, right? Get that? To study ideas that we are not allowed to live by. The majority and the minority opinions sit side by side on the page. As students of Talmud, we learn Hillel and Shammai, Abaye and Rabbi. Both voices are heard and studied deeply with intensity and curiosity, even though in the end, the law allows us to follow only one. In this way, for Judaism, the intellectual world is broader than the practical world. But now, as philosopher Micha Goodman suggests, our intellectual world has shrunk to the size of the practical. The polarization of today, absolutist speech combined with algorithms that limit what we see, have made it so that we live in an anti-Talmudic world. And this is actually dangerous. The culture of the Talmud is guided by values, particularly one, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and also these are the words of the living God, v'halacha kehillel, and the law is like Hillel. At the core of the Babylonian Talmud is the idea that we must not demonize the alternative opinion, nor the one who holds that opinion, no matter how much we disagree, for it too is the word of the living God. Kal v'chomer, the law follows Hillel, dafka, because in his school, the teachings of his rival Shammai are also studied. The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, goes even further, saying, the law follows Hillel over Shammai, it argues, because Shammai only studies Shammai, but Hillel ro'in divrei beit Shammai v'chozrin bahem. The students of Hillel took Shammai's teaching so seriously that they were willing to change their own minds. They were not trapped in their own way of thinking. Nowadays, changing one's opinion is treated as a sin in and of itself. It's considered flip-flopping. A leader who does this is told they have no values regarding such important topics, and they quickly lose their authority. But what if we could come to respect that precisely because the issue is important and nuanced, it might take time and extra thought to come to a conclusion? What if we valued the process in which over time new evidence, new experiences, and ever-changing reality may bring thoughtful people to change their minds, and that may be something that should be celebrated, not condemned. The world is complicated right now. As Rabbi Nachman taught, the whole world is a very narrow bridge, and it is frightening to cross when it is so narrow that we have to pass across one person at a time. What if we could create a world that is truly a wider bridge, with room and strength and willingness to cross together, to lean on one another as we do, to hear one another's pains, one another's fears, to allow the other to collapse onto us, and for us to collapse onto them as we find our way forward. It might just make this painful period livable. When we're feeling lost and not sure where we're going, we must get there together. As we said at Kol Nidre, Anu matirin lihitpalel im ha'avaryanim. We are permitted to pray with those who have transgressed. I would suggest the word should be Anu chayavim. We are obligated to do so. And who are those avaryanim? Each and every one of us. We all have shortcomings and even sins. We all have fears and frustrations. We all have vulnerabilities we want so desperately to hide. But Yom Kippur is here to tell us we must not allow that or anything to divide us. Whatever ideals and ideas we hold, whoever we are, we can and must pray. We must live together. We must find a way to rely on and to learn to trust each other, to dare to be vulnerable, to dare to see our own chata'im, our own sins, not just those of others, to dare to make space for others to do the same, to trust that we can lean on and even fall against, collapse onto one another, holding each other up, however is needed. We may not know exactly where we're going, nor what the future holds, but we must live into it together. May we, as a community, find the courage and the emunah to do just that. Gemar Chatima Tova.